وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد، أحبتي في الله، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. حياكم الله. We ask that Allah Azza wa Jal, the Almighty, accepts our good and forgives our evil. And may Allah Ta'ala protect us and preserve us and guide us to that which pleases Him. And may Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala safeguard our households and our families and our marriages and help us to preserve ourselves and our families. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala says, في كتابه الكريم يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala says, في كتابه الكريم, and He's talking to the believers, talking to Ahl Iman wa Sunnah. He says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا, O you who believe, save yourself and your families from the fire. And one of the ways to save ourselves from the fires is by, of course, strengthening our iman and through the institution of zawaj, of marriage. And I wanted to talk very briefly, as brief as I can. There's a lot more I really wanted to prepare and say, but things didn't work out quite that way for me. But I wanted to mention some of the reasons that we face the problem of talaq, meaning divorce. And these are things that, this damages and separates families. And the family, that's the asl of the Muslim community. You build your community. How do you produce scholars in the future? How do you produce leaders in the future? Of course, it comes through nikah, it comes through marriage, it comes through husband and wife, it comes through raising children, and they become the future leaders. They are the future. So the institution of zawaj, of marriage, is so important, and it's so important to preserve it. And along with that, ahabati fillah, we see that in this time that we experience a lot of divorce, a lot of talaq. There's a lot of talaq, a lot of divorce, and there's many, many reasons for that. And I hope to just talk about a few things here. And first, just jumping right into the topic, or maybe beforehand, during the time of the Salaf, especially during the Sahaba, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in, that some people, they, on many different occasions, they came to the Sahaba, various Sahabi, to arbitrate their disputes, marital disputes, or to say, O Amir al-Mu'mineen. There's several narrations of different Sahaba in which they were addressed by people who said things like, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, I divorced my wife 30 times or 90 times. And the response was, the 3 times that you did was sufficient, and everything beyond that, you have incurred sin. You've got to sin for each of those times, okay? And this is because the importance of marriage and preserving marriage, and the importance of not being oppressive and harmful to the women. And especially in the times of Jahiliyyah and throughout history, it has been, women have been exploited and oppressed. And unfortunately, even today, and in many societies, and in many times in the institution of marriage, you find that women are oppressed. So those issues need to be dealt with. And we have to know and understand that marriage is an institution, that is an institution of ibadah. As the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that if you were to go to when he was talking about having relations with the wife versus zina, he said, basically, don't you know that if you, go to a woman in a haram way through zina, you're going to be punished. And so the opposite is true, that if you go to your wife, you'll actually be rewarded, meaning you will get ajr for that. So that is an extra motivation for those who are in the marital institution to preserve that institution and to implement halal relations and those things which are going to entice, for example, the women enticing their husbands and the husbands enticing their wives, appearing handsome and strong to their wives or whatever they like, smelling good, being clean. Likewise, the women should do the same, because there is reward in doing that, lillah, and there is reward in actually the relations that the husband and the wife have. So one of the reasons that we have divorce, one out of the many reasons, is due to the lack of performance, meaning lack of social relations. They're not having relations as a husband and wife. Sometimes that can be from the point of the husband. The husband can be either he can be perhaps unable, maybe he's physically, due to stress, due to the other things that affect people now with the chemicals and stuff like that, due to sin. Maybe he's involved in all kind of sin, so his wife is not even attractive to him anymore. He's looking at the muharramat, he's involved in this, he's involved in that. And so he doesn't find attraction for his wife anymore. So those can be some of the harms from the angle of the men. Or there is no barakah in their marriage. They could both, or one partner can be involved in sin, in major sins, okay? Or their household could be built upon sins. Maybe no one prays in their household. So how do you find an Islamic solution when no one is praying? Of course, this can lead to, because you have no Islamic bonds to keep you grounded, so it's easy for the shaitan to just prey upon you. As is mentioned in the hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about how the shayateen are sent every day, and those ones, some of them are rewarded when they come back and they give the news that they were able to separate a husband and wife. That's pretty amazing when you think about it, that there's even a hadith about this that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, showing us that this is a key way that the shaitan gains power and influences Bani Adam. And that is through destroying the Muslim household and the Muslim community. So it shows how important that bond is, and that its destruction is a reason that the shayateen rejoice. So also those lack of relations, being, as we're talking about, this is one of the reasons, can be from the angle of the wife as well. That the wife herself maybe doesn't take care of herself. Or maybe she just doesn't give, every day, every minute is the same. Her husband goes to work, he comes home, she's in the same state he left her. Okay? She doesn't do anything to beautify herself. She doesn't do anything to entice him. She doesn't, whatever, perfume herself or whatever. Every household is different on the things they like, or every man is different, every woman is different in those things that they enjoy. But perhaps the woman herself doesn't give concern to herself anymore, or has never done it. This is also a reason to cause some men to look outside their household and to even go into muharramat. And so that can also be a contributing factor to talaq, to divorce. Another, and along with this is something very important. Actually, it kind of relates to the next sabab, the next reason. The next reason, and I talked about this yesterday a little bit, about anger. The Prophet ﷺ advised his community. He said, La taghdab. He advised a man who came to him. He came and he asked, Usini. I seek your advice. Give me advice. He came to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked 3 times. The Prophet ﷺ each time said, La taghdab, La taghdab, La taghdab. Do not become angry. So anger is a reason. Also, people who are unable to control their anger is a reason for talaq. And sometimes that's due to the person themselves, either that, so many men, this from the angle of the men, some men do not know how to control their anger. So some men are even violent. Maybe they come from a background of violence and abuse, and it's almost generational. Maybe they have mental issues, so they don't know how to deal with scenarios and situations, and they only know how to react with frustration and anger. Maybe the pressures of the dunya are getting to them, and they still the whole bottom line is going back to the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, la taghdab. Do not become angry, meaning you need to take the shari'i ways of how to control that anger. Okay? You shouldn't be, your household should not be where your wife is living in fear about what she cooked or what she didn't cook, that you're going to explode, that you're going to maybe become violent, that you're maybe going to, you cause fear in her, you're going to threaten her to marry another wife or what have you. These are all dangerous traits. These are all dangerous things that bring fear into the household, and they keep the woman living in fear. And a lot of that is due to anger. And some men, and this is, you find this in certain societies. I was listening to Sheikh Muhammad Ali Imam, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, one of our scholars in Yemen, and he was talking about how in their society, how a lot of men will swear, instead of swearing by Allah, they will swear that, if I don't do this, I'll divorce my wife. Well, it's, like, wallahi, I'll divorce my wife. They say these kind of things, okay? And that this is a plague in that community. So maybe this is something common in some Arab societies, or in Yemen specifically, because the Sheikh was talking about Yemen specifically. So it shows us how some men, because of either a lack of knowledge and how most of us take marriage and divorce kind of lightly, that we don't realize, as the Prophet ﷺ said, those are some of the biggest biggest issues to concern ourselves with, and that are very serious. And that it's the issue of nikah, because that, marriage makes the private parts lawful for one another, and the and talaq. So those are matters we should never joke about. So some of the men, they even swear by Allah, and a lot of times this can be out of anger, or it could be out of ignorance, that they will divorce their wife if such and such and such and such happens. Another scenario, and this is common everywhere, that you'll find many men who will say, if you leave the house, you're divorced. That's it. I said no. No is no. You leave the house, you're divorced. If you do this, you're divorced. If you go outside the house again with your abaya like this, you're divorced. If you wear this, you're divorced. If you do this, you might as well not come back. So a lot of men, out of anger, they threaten their wives. Then on the other hand, the Sheikh also mentioned this example. He said that some of the women, they out of arrogance, which is also equally haram and also contributes to those divorces and so forth, is some of the women become rebellious because of the threats of their husband. So the husband is wrong due to his anger and threatening her with divorce just easily. If you don't pour my coffee, you're divorced. If you don't fix my coffee the best way I like it, you're divorced. Okay? And some of the women will deliberately not do those things. So then they'll disobey their husbands. Or they will go out in the streets anyway. No, I'm going to see my friend anyway. I don't care what he said. He said he's going to divorce you. Let's see if he's going to do it. So they will challenge the men. Or they will do other things to harm their husband, fueling the fire. That's equally haram and equally helps to contribute to talaq. So your marriage you should not allow your marriage to break down where it's just a series of threats and challenges and disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And importantly with that is to control one's anger. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said in a hadith, he said, لا يفرق, which means don't become angry. He says, لا يفرق مؤمن مؤمنة إن كره منها خلقا رضي منها آخر. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, he said that do not become angry. You know, or a Muslim believing man does not become angry with the believing woman, or he doesn't hate her. I'm sorry, not angry, but hating. This is actually not to hate, not angry, but it's hatred. So do not hate, the believing man does not hate the believing woman. If he dislikes something from her character or her manners or her conduct, he is pleased with something else. And that's because they're both mu'mineen. So that's very, very important for the believers to look to the good of one another. And there's tons of things to say about this. If I had prepared, which I should have, but I did the other lecture and everything just went, it was Jumu'ah and many things happened. We could have really went into detail, and perhaps we will, because I do want to get into some of these things, because many people, these are many things that affect us all in our communities, with so many divorces and so many needs to get married and so many of this and so many problems and so much discord and so much, you know, it's become a plague in the world community and specifically in the Muslim community. In Muslim community, I don't mean just in the West, I mean everywhere. These are lectures. Actually, I'm taking something which is based from a student, I believe, in Saudi Arabia. And then I was listening today to Sheikh Muhammad al-Imam in Yemen. These plagues affect the Muslims everywhere. So it's very important that we understand these issues and the prophetic advice on how to nu'allij hada. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, خيركم لأهله وأنا خيركم لأهلي. Nabiyyuna Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we need to hear this. You know, these are reminders. I'm getting reminded as we remind one another. So important. That's why I always say, ta'allam ilm. Study knowledge, Islamic knowledge, because the dhikr, tanfa'al mu'mineen, reminding, it benefits the believer. So the one who's on Kitab wa Sunnah aslan, they're going to benefit from the reminder, no matter what. An alim, if you go to a scholar and you mention a hadith to him, and he knows this hadith, he's explained it 1,000 times, he's written books on it, he's going to probably say jazakallah khair, because he's a person of taqwa. So he's reminded, because we're not always 100%, you know, vigilant in our iman. And our iman fluctuates. And we need the reminder, because the reminder, tanfa'al mu'mineen, it reminds a believer. Now the fasiq, the disobedient one, they may be reminded. But some of the people, the ones who go to tajawuz al-had, some of the people, they just go to disbelief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're bothered by it. They're not reminded. They're bothered. They don't like it. So anyhow, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, خيركم لأهلي وأنا خيركم لأهلي. He sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the best of you are those who are best to their families. And he said, وأنا, me, I am the best of you to my family. You know, meaning he's the best. You know, we can try to emulate the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in goodness and in righteousness. But that is the exhortation to deal with the anger, to deal with shortcomings in one another. And if you want to follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you want to claim you're from Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, and you want to say that you're a follower of the Salaf as-Salih and the Minhaj as-Salafi, then this hadith should mean something to you. Because, of course, if you're following the madhab of the Salaf, you're following the best way, the best madhab. You're following the way of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in. And he sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, khayrakum. He said, the best of you are those who are best of their ahli. So right there, someone from Ahl Sunnah, who's truly from Ahl Sunnah, trying to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have to jump right on that. And like, oh, let me get a gift today. Let me get back on track right now. I better say a kind word or something. You know, Allah mistan. May Allah forgive us and help us and guide us and bless us all to be better. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. So we know that this is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and it's a type of ilaj. But going back to this reason we're talking about specifically is we need to control our anger. Because anger, yati min what comes from anger is everything evil, as some of the Salaf used to say. From some of our scholars used to say in the past, that anger, only evil comes from anger. This is really it's like the mother, like when they say Khaba'ith, talking about alcohol, the mother of all evils. Anger is also perhaps the father or the cousin of all evils. It's there because it fuels so much. And so I want to mention something along with this. Is due to that anger, so many marriages have broken up, and especially this is a problem with the youth because they don't know how serious it is. Some people have been divorced for years and they don't even know it. They've been divorced for years. The husband is pronounced talaq on them 473 times, and they still just say, I didn't really mean it, or whatever, and he may have meant it at the time, but his anger. The scholars, they look at even the hukum. That's a whole point in fiqh, a mas'ala in fiqh, so, which is hukum talaq al-ghadban. The ruling of the angry person's divorce. Meaning when someone is angry, when does it count as a divorce? So the scholars, there is some difference, but generally, and the most correct view, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So if you were going to an Islamic court in Saudi Arabia or Yemen or wherever, the sheikh would ask you there, he would ask you about this, how your anger was. And so they say, if yadhab al-aql, if the intellect was not present, then they say the talaq of the ghadban is not, it's not really talaq. Okay, so she wouldn't be divorced. But if he had because some people, they do lose their intellect. Some people really, they're when from anger they become so angry, that they totally lose cognizance. There are many people perhaps like this. Not all people. I'm not that kind of person. I can get really angry, but I'm most always aware of what I'm doing. I don't get so angry I just drink alcohol or I do this. No, I know what I'm doing, So different people are different. Some people are not able to really control their anger. Maybe it's a mental deficiency. Maybe it's this. Maybe they are that's just the way they are and their past and whatever. Some people cannot control their anger. So it's something to be very cautious about, controlling your anger, striving to harness it. And knowing that these are serious issues. That's why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that marriage and talaq are so serious. They're such serious issues. Those are things that people take lightly, but they're very serious in the law. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're very serious. And so going back to what we said, so it's very important to be good between spouses. The husband and the wife should be good. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the woman is the ra'iyatu fi bayti zawjiha, that the woman, she is the guardian and the one responsible over her husband's house. So that's very important to make sure that we take care of those responsibilities. So that moves on to the next point. And again, maybe one day we'll actually go into some of these issues with a bit more preparation. But we're just going to talk about it briefly because it's already the time. I didn't look at the time so much. Another reason that for the divorce between husbands and wives is that there's a laziness regarding the hukuk, the rights of one another. There's either laziness or they are ignorant and they don't give one another their rights. So some men, and I think some men do this even if they have one wife, but definitely this happens a lot when some men are married to more than one wife, that they may give, they're unequal. That's number one. Number two, they may not give one wife rights at all. She may not get anything. And it could be either that they agreed, and then we talked about it, I think, in one of the other lessons when we talked about the concept of misayar, which is the marital contract where the woman gives up her right to be spent upon, but she's agreed to that, and all the other conditions for nikah are there. So, but some men, they abuse that. Some men, they abuse that scenario, and even if they have means or something, they don't do anything for their wives, or they don't take care of them. And so that is very important, that the Muslim man, the husband, that he gives his wife her rights, in spending and in time and trying to bring her happiness. That those are important. And following the sunnah, as we mentioned, khayrakum, the best of you are those who are the best to their families. So those rights is that he spends upon her when he has the means, as far as, buying her clothes when he can afford, when he has clothes on his back, shelter when he has shelter, food when he has food, giving her those basic rights, that he's taking care of her financially. Also, there's also those other things, but the Sharia especially emphasizes those things, but likewise, even the physical, even physically, giving her the affection that she needs, although it's more emphasized in the Sharia as far as for the men. It's more emphasized. There's nusus sarih as far as the men for that, because the man, his primary role, along with the physical and mental and spiritual, taking care of his wife and the financial, but the woman's, the man's right over the woman is predominantly based upon her listening to him and being obedient in that which is in maruf, in ta'atillah, in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that when he calls her, that she is hadira, that she's ready, that she gives herself to her husband physically. So that's very important, because when there's a breakdown in those rights, we see that that's also a reason for divorce. For example, the woman who doesn't, this is very common, very, very common, that a lot of women, they become angry about something. It might even be something light. Shoot, you're not going to buy me that new television? Huh? Okay, we'll see what you get when you want what you want. And these are real scenarios. This is very real. And that's muharram, and the malaika curse her until the morning when she refuses him. So it's very important. The husband needs that right. And we talked about this before, because of the men, like I said, they're like lions. Even science is more and more looking, from that, the secular point of view of science and so forth, that this is the nature of men. That's why the Sharia has warned so much about the sins of falling, related to, following your desires regarding women, especially men. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Ittaqu dunya wa ittaqu nisa." He said, fear the dunya, fear the worldly life, this worldly, because the deception, it can take you away from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa ittaqu nisa, and fear nisa. What does that mean? Stay away from women? No. But it means that there's so many sins that can emanate by chasing and following the women. And the women are enticing, and it's within our nature. So women, a lot of them, they know that's their weapon. The women know. They know how to just put on a little bit of this, boom, and they got the whole block shook up. They know how to make the smell good on them. Wow. Whole nations fall practically, okay? And then I'm just barely exaggerating. So it shows you that there's an inherent power that they have. And that's the reason for the modesty. That's the reason for the hijab. And that's the reason for protecting yourself. And that can be a destruction for many, many men. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ittaqu nisa," fear the women. So that way you don't fall into that muharramat. So that way you're not knocked off the path. Because a bad woman can take a righteous man down very easily. Knock him right off the horse. And this is a very real scenario, and that's why you see from the scholars, and a lot of people don't relate to the scholars. It seems so extreme. Why are you always talking about lowering your gaze? Why are you always talking about this? This is haram. That's makruh. Why are you saying that? Because the scholars, they look at what one principle that is very important, sadd-ad-dariya, which means that they cut off the bab. They cut the whole dang lock off, so there is no door handle to get to zina. In fact, sometimes they board up the door with bricks and mortars. And that is with their ahkam, with the rulings, because they're closing the door, because we see how so many people fall through that door, slither under that door. It's so easy. It can knock you all the way off talib al-ilm on the way to Dars with all his books, going to the book Dars and Hadith. He sees something on the street, just a simple woman, boom, perfume, bow. He drops his books. He don't even know which way he's going. And this is real. This is the nature of men. So it's very important to practice those things to protect yourself. And likewise, of course, protecting your marriage by safeguarding your household. So again, going back to this point, is that the lack of giving one another their rights, the husband and the wife fulfilling one another's rights, this can be one of the reasons for talaq. This can be very destructive for a marriage and cause great harm to the Muslim family. And I think we'll end there. There's a lot to say, and we'll probably prepare a whole nother lecture and go in depth and more exact, more specific to give it its right, because the topic really needs its right. We need to give it its haqq. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, to accept our good and forgive our evil. Anything I said that was correct was from Allah Azza wa Jalla. Anything I said that was incorrect was from myself and the shaitan. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We'll see if there's any relevant questions really quickly. And then definitely I have to go. I see something about if those kids legal. I don't know what the person's talking about. So I have done some research and found that one of the reasons for divorce is communication problems. For example, husband is shy and not social with wife. What advice have you got? That's very important. Yes. So that can be in a couple of different ways. That and that was a whole nother thing I wanted to talk about. So another reason for a divorce is also incompatibility. And that could be, generally the incompatibility we're referring to is, one being religious, one not being religious, or something like this. But also, that could also be in character traits. Some people are very strong and stern, and some people are very shy, as you mentioned, but sometimes they complement each other. But sometimes people are battling because of their lack of compatibility. So that's a big problem. So if a husband is really shy and a woman is very forthcoming. Let me see exactly what you, let's see what happened. One of the reasons for divorce is communication problems. So yeah, communication is very important. It comes down to establishing lines of communication, learning how to be honest with one another. And that's a very big challenge for some people. Some people are used to being yes men or yes women, and they don't know how to be honest. They're always concerned about the other person's feeling or whatever. There's a variety of reasons for that. So it's very important in a marriage, obviously, to have communication. So it's very important for a couple when they have those issues, is that they should strive to work on those issues, and if they have to seek counseling in those things in order to help their marriage, then that may be the case too. Sometimes it requires that. Okay. So it's really going to depend on the people and what level and how that shyness is affecting their marriage, how her forwardness or whatever affects the marriage, or whatever the case may be, if there's that incompatibility or what have you. Physical attraction is the most important thing in a marriage, because how could a person feel comfortable in a house with a woman he finds ugly? Wow. Likewise with the man. So remember, I like I said, I think because of the time we live in, the societies we live in, what we've been exposed to, that those issues become even more important. for the men and the women. There's a lot of women, they want the man who looks like so-and-so XYZ. I don't know who the XYZs are, and I don't need you to name them for me, but that's just the reality. You know, women, they have, you know, there's a lot of women. There are those women also, those women who just want a really good religious person. Some women are really undeemed. That's a bonus for them, but they don't even really, that's not a big deal for them. And even for some men, but I say that a lot, especially men, the attraction is a big thing. The attraction is a big thing, and I think that's becoming more so for the women too. And that's why I say, in order to prevent, because you're talking about maybe marriage, but within the marriage, even to keep the marriage good, it's important for the couples to be honest and know what each other likes. For example, if a woman, maybe she was athletic before Islam or as a Muslim or whatever the case may be. Anyway, she takes care of herself. That's just who she is. She loves to eat healthy and stuff. And her husband doesn't even eat healthy. He eats anything, you know, as long as it's halal. It has a stamp halal. You know, he's eating Twinkies, eating cupcakes, he's eating garbage food, and he's obese, or he has sicknesses because of that, or whatever the case may be. You know, that could be a big problem. She may be kind of disgusted by him. Some women are to that level, you know, and so it's very important for the husband and the wife to both take care of themselves. Try to give each other what they like. You know, if you like, you know, you're a particularly clean person, you need that, you like the person to also smell good, like smell like perfumed or with attar or something. Well, then that's something you express, and, you know, and you try to keep that in your household. Some people like makeup, some people hate makeup. You know, those are all different preferences. And, you know, the important thing is that they try to satisfy one another and try to please one another in the looks, and that's within the marriage in order to prevent the divorce. You know, take care of themselves physically. You know, some women, they're not active like that. They never were, and they don't want to walk, they don't want to jog, or they don't want to, you know, whatever, take care of themselves. And the man might be the exact opposite, likewise. So, you know, they have to find their happy medium. You know, as a couple, they need to talk and discuss those things, because that's a very important part of attraction. You know, for some people. Some people, it's not as big of a deal. So it's going to depend upon the couple and what they, you know, their particular issues and attractions. Some women are chasers. For example, they get married to an attractive person and they start chasing other women or men. Yep, there's all kind of crazy issues there. But also, you get married to her, should have thought about it before, and then lower your gaze, because you'll compare her with every girl from the social media, etc. Yeah, so like I said, those are problems by, you know, getting involved in all these things and what people have been exposed to, and this affects the heart. Do you believe that men what a beautiful woman, while women don't care about, and I think we just talked about this already, that that men and women both, it can be, and it's going to depend on the person. Some people, I mean, you can believe what you want, but I've known a lot of, you know, in my travels, and a lot of women in various cultures and religious women. And like I said, they exist. There are those women who really don't, they literally, you know, fi sabilillah, they just, all they care about. I'm dead serious. It's not always, you know, so I think that's why I'm saying the point is things are changing, and it's going to depend on your stimulus. If you've had that stimulus, you've been bombarded, you're coming from a different perspective. You've probably grown up in the West. You know, you have a total different exposure compared to someone who hasn't been exposed to all those things. Social media, among other things. There are whole societies in essence that haven't, and that have had that tarbiyah. I know a lot of people like this. I know men and women who are, you know, their world is so different. It's like a different planet. So like I said, it is our fitra, our nature to be attracted and stuff. But I say that everyone's going to be different in how they emphasize those things of attraction. I don't say that, you know, like some women, there's a famous Dai, for example, and I think he was mutilated. I don't know what his thing was. He had all kind of issues, like maybe no arms and all this, but he was really good. He was maybe Kuwaiti or something. He was an Arab who became religious and stuff like this, and he was doing a lot of dawah in Africa and having a lot of in one of the countries and having a lot of positive success. And there were women who were just, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, calling in, wanting to marry. And he married sisters that were, you know, religious and healthy and what have you. They could have a man who has limbs and stuff like this, but they married for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, you don't have that everywhere. It would be much harder in the West to have that have that happen. But again, it just depends on the person. Like I said, we don't want to paint an overall brush. I'd say it's more overwhelmingly so that women are, of course, are attracted to men, and they're attracted to when they make choices and stuff like that. But there are, like I said, there are those women out there, and perhaps some men out there too, who are definitely much less concerned about those issues. And I know this personally. A lot of stuff here. I think you already know about mutabarrij. Why, you know, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot. We already know women can't. They have to wear their hijab. They have to dress properly and not wear makeup and not wear perfume outdoors and cover themselves, and among other things. So there's I think people have talked about whole lectures you can get about that if they're asking for knowledge-wise, or if you're just trying to make a point. I'm not sure. Marcus Al-Albani, yeah, I know a little bit about it. Those were a lot of students of Imam Al-Albani, and Sheikh Ali Hassan Al-Halabi, rahmatullahi alayhi, was a part of that. They have some very nice lectures and books. And, but no, I've never visited or had any relations there. What do you have a sister who was not upon the manhaj of Salaf? Do you still marry? Or, of course, that's going to be on your decision. You want to marry a righteous woman, okay? And that she's open. You don't want someone she's like, she could be a nice girl and really good and pretty or whatever else, but you see that she is pretty obstinate. Her father is like a Ashari Sufi scholar, you know, or a grave worshiper or something, and she is on that. No, you should not marry a woman like that. So it's going to depend on the level of, you know, what is her openness? Is she open? Is she going to listen to her husband and trust? And are you able to to invite her to the sunnah? But if she's ba'id, very far from the sunnah, then you are gambling in a sense, taking a chance there. Is obese men a problem that gets into marriage? Yeah, of course, that can be a problem. Some women, they like their men fit. I mean, look how many women are into fitness and exercise, and even Muslim sisters that are really serious about it. They're gonna, most of the time, as they say, birds of a feather flock together. They're gonna want a man who's constantly kind of trying to take care of himself. Not even that he was fit, but then he just loses. You know, that's going to depend on her iman and on her whatever. It's going to depend on many factors, but these are issues. You know, some women, because with obesity comes a lot of other things aside from the attractiveness and stuff like this, but also health issues arise and stuff like that. So it's going to depend on the woman, how she is. Is it haram for a woman to marry a Khawarij? Of course, if he's a takfeeree, you know, a very dangerous thing, she should not do that. You know, it's going to influence her. And that's the bottom line. Again, is looking at, that's a part of religious compatibility, and with the women, they're going to follow more than likely. So of course, if she's on the sunnah, why would she even think of marrying someone who is, making takfir of all the other Muslims and crazy stuff like this, wants her to join ISIS or some crazy stuff? Why does that really, she'll be destroying herself. She'll be destroying herself. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, accept our good and forgive our evil. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.